When I was 5 years old, I remember my kindergarten teacher helping my classmates and I learn the words to the Pledge of Allegiance. Now, as a part of her teaching us the words of the pledge, she also taught us the meaning of the pledge and why we should be proud to say those words and to honor the principles of overall fairness granted to all people lucky enough to be born in or living in the United States of America. And as I was practicing that declaration just shy of about 30 words, I remember there was this one word, tripped me up, indivisible, which must, in my young and developing mind, must have sounded a lot like invisible. And while invisible didn't make much sense at the time, hey, I was learning. So if that's what it said, I was rolling with it. So every morning, I would place my little hand over my heart, and I would stare at that large red, white, and blue flag, and I would recite that pledge. I would recite it along with about 20 plus other black and brown students, and I would say loudly and proudly. Y'all gotta understand, I was real dramatic as a kid. So I was loud and I was proud and I was saying, one nation, under God, invisible, with liberty and justice for all. And while that was cute as a child, I began to think about what I was actually saying as an adult. One nation, under God, invisible. You know, that singular mispronunciation of a word that I didn't quite understand at the time proved to be an explosion of prophecy for my life and the lives of many other people like me. That 5-year-old black queer girl who is now this 30-plus black queer woman did not at the time realize how each of those identities, black, queer, girl, woman, would compound the other and push my very being so far into the margins that the beauty of my black queer existence began to feel invisible. Invisible in educational institutions as well as the larger society. Now I want you guys to hear me and hear my heart when I say this. We will never be able to truly embrace the ideologies of what it means to be indivisible until each individual is actually made visible. I want to say it again because I really want you to feel that in your souls. We will never be able to truly embrace the ideology of what it means to be indivisible until each individual is truly made visible. So as educators, it is immensely important that we recognize the ways that our students with multiple oppressed identities are experiencing the world in far more harmful ways. To help us understand that, I draw upon Black feminist scholar Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw, who coined the term intersectionality. Dr. Crenshaw explains intersections by characterizing the ways that multiple identities are interrelated. So she helps us understand it by saying it like this. We can't just say that we simply have a race problem over here or just a gender problem here or a class problem back there or an LGBTQ problem somewhere over there. See, thinking about those things separately erases what happens to those who are subject to all of those things at the same time and therefore are often made to feel invisible. So by not seeing the unique challenges of our Black queer youth, even well-intentioned educational systems will further exacerbate inequalities for all of their students, but more specifically for their queer youth of color, who statistics tell us are living in a world and are being educated in schools that judges who they are far more harshly. And here's why. Here's why. Schools inherently operate under a systemic set of values that tell us things like what is right and what is wrong, what is good, what is bad, whose voices are centered and can be heard, and whose are not, whose get erased, who gets to be seen as visible and who remains invisible. For LGBTQ youth, their very beings violate societal standards of what it means to be normal. And therefore, they are the least likely to have access to resources or opportunities simply because of victimization and discrimination. But here's the worst part about that. Sometimes our teachers and administrators play a large role in bringing forth these victimizations and discriminations when they fail to disrupt and sometimes even encourage other students to make derogatory remarks about our LGBTQ youth. Our friends over at the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Educational Network, or as some of us may know it as GLSEN, tell us that LGBTQ youth have a much more difficult time in school, which could result in missing multiple days. Some struggle academically, and for some, it gets so bad, they just drop out. GLSEN also tells us that our LGBTQ youth are at higher risk of homelessness, becoming addicted to drugs, being involved in the criminal justice system, and just being involved in far more risky behavior. And while there's a growing body of research that focus on the issues of LGBTQ youth as a whole, it has been my experience that much of that research fails to understand how each of those things are compounded and intensified for Black queer youth who are at the intersections of racism, homophobia, and transphobia at the same time. So what am I saying? What am I saying? I'm saying that there has to be a complete disruption of anti-Black and anti-queer educational practices within our school systems. I'm saying that we must strategize ways with our teachers, our administrators, our students, our parents, our community members, that we learn how to advance our understanding of what it means to be inclusive and understand what power relationships look like in schools. I am saying that we need to start asking questions that center projects and humanization. That means that we allow for each other to be human, to see the human in each of us, so that we can be able to have discourse around inclusivity and create space for people to have agency over their own lives. Because as a Black queer learner myself, I long to see representations of me in the textbooks that I read and the lessons that I learned. It was my desire to hear stories about Black queer joy and not just about Black suffering or the complete erasure of all things queer. For me, being educated in a system that didn't fully embrace my Blackness or my queerness made me feel a sense of internalized oppression, which means that I began to feel that I was inadequate. I began to think that there were parts of me that were less valuable because whether it was said or not, whether it was intentional or not, that was, and in many cases still is, the message. So I hope you're asking yourself now, what can we do to change that message? Well, I'm glad you guys asked. This is why we're here. This is an opportunity for us to learn and grow together. So here are a few things that we can do in our own classrooms that will allow us to create more equitable spaces for our students. The first thing we can do, simple, acknowledge it. I know that it may sound cliche, but simply acknowledging the history of racism and homophobia within our classroom spaces is the first step to creating lasting changes. The second thing we can do is get educated. Now, I know it's easy to say that our school leadership should be providing professional development and things that will allow us to have more skills in being inclusive. But if they're not doing that, if your schools are not taking that step, then it is up to you to become educated. There are plenty of online resources that would allow you to become more inclusive in your classrooms and feel more confident in doing so. The third thing you can do is maybe start a GSA or a gay straight alliance. These types of things create community for our LGBTQ youth where they can feel like they can be themselves and have a community of people that support them along with allies. The fourth thing you can do is create a plan of a response. Make it so that your students can confidentially come and tell you when things are happening to them in school, when they do feel discriminated against or they do feel victimized. But more importantly than that, more importantly than them having the opportunity to tell you, is that we have to make sure that we are holding those who are victimizing our babies fully accountable. And the last thing, I really want you to feel this in your soul. Understand that representation matters. I'm going to say it again. Representation matters. Create space in your curriculum for LGBTQ and Black positivity. Hang signage, make posters. These small little things can help your classrooms feel safer and more inclusive. Today It is my life's work to create spaces, or to at least help to begin to change the narrative for other Black queer youth who are being educated in spaces where they may feel that they are not valued. I do it for that 5-year-old little girl who was once excited to learn the pledge. A little girl who didn't quite understand what it meant to be indivisible. A word that simply means unable to be separated or divided. Unable to be separated or divided. And the irony of that is, if you actually look at the word indivisible, it gives us a simple formula on the ways in which we all should be treating each other, not only in the classroom, but in the world. I call it my theory of indivisibility. Take the first 3 letters, IND. IND is an acronym for individual. Each of us have a right, a God-given right to be an individual, a right to be exactly who we are in whatever space that we are in, and not to have any parts of us pushed away or made to feel like it is less than or not valued. The second part of that is the word visible, the ability to be seen. If we can conceptualize those very small thoughts, an individual made visible, then we too can understand that theory of indivisibility for all of our students. And that is how I look at myself now. I look at myself as a full individual made visible, not somebody who is feeling inadequate, not somebody who is feeling less valued. I see myself as a whole person now because somebody done messed around and showed me who I was. And now I step in all of that Black queer joy in every room that I go in. And if we can do that very thing for our students and let them feel power in who they are and not have any piece of them feel inadequate or have any piece of them feel like it does not belong, then we too can place our hands over our hearts within the inclusive spaces that we have made, and we can say loudly and we can say proudly, just like that 5-year-old girl, one nation, under God, each individual made completely visible with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.